When Hailey realizes her real father is the mysterious leader of the Hunter organization, her life is turned upside down. Meanwhile, Chase suffers a fatal injury in a fierce battle with the Hunters, and Hailey has to make a tough choice between her werewolf lover and her human heritage. Chapter 38. I hate this stupid fucking plan. Lily came back in, her lips in a thin line as she nodded to me. It's done. All set up. And now we wait. We wait until our scouts say it's clear to move. I tried everything. I tried to eat, talk, strategize, but nothing could take my mind off of Hailey. She was out there right now, in the woods, dangling from her feet as the bait for those vile hunters. Her neck is on the line, and it scares the hell out of me. And part of me knows that she'll be perfectly fine. She's been trained to handle high-stakes situations. But it doesn't help me one bit. I thought back to earlier in the day, when the plan started to come together. We can't just sit here like pigs waiting to be slaughtered. Luke exclaimed, the vein in his neck sticking out as he grew more and more angry. I refuse to be killed by that scum. So I think we all need to pull our heads out of our asses and figure this shit out. I growled, forcing him to submit. I agree. But yelling at each other isn't going to solve anything. I think we should attack first, Lily said, interrupting our testosterone match off. If they're planning on attacking us tonight, the last thing they'd be expecting is for us to attack them, right? If they're preparing to attack, then they'll be prepared for a fight. Taking it to them would only give them the upper hand of familiar territory, I said, looking over to Hailey, who nodded in agreement with me. I couldn't help but flicker my eyes to her bare neck. Fuck, did I want to mark her so bad? So what? Lily continued. We just wait and hope we can fight them off. No, that's idiotic. Luke growled out, earning a fierce glare from Lily. He rolled his eyes at her. Oh, bite me. Gladly. She bit with a smirk. Guys, I barked. Not now. We need to figure this out. It's not only our lives on the line, but our pack. You need someone on the inside. Hailey spoke up, turning all our heads to her. Hunters take their shit seriously. They would never expect any one of them to flip sides, no matter how much we detest one another. If I can get in, we'd have a chance too. Absolutely not. I grumbled, my wolf and I upset at just the thought of her going back there. I won't let you just waltz right into the lion's den. Besides, you said it yourself, you can't exactly just go back there without suspicion anyways. Well, no one's saying I go back on my own, she stated slowly. You could use me as a warning. Give me a message to give to them. Make it clear you mean business. All the while clearing it up that I had no part in any of it. If they believe my story, which they'd believe anything that gives them more motive to attack you, I can get back into their good graces. Maybe even take out the chief while I'm at it. It's too dangerous, I growled. Lily cut in, standing in front of Hailey as she stared at me, an eyebrow raised and her arms folded across her chest. It's also the only good plan we have. Luke clapped his hand on my shoulder. As much as I hate to admit it, Hailey and Lily are right. It's our best option at this point. It's our only option, Hailey enforced, looking at me with kind, encouraging eyes. I mentally swore to end this bond and the things she makes me feel. Begrudgingly, I nodded. Okay, fine. But I'm making a couple additions to the plan. Luke came up next to me, snapping me out of my daze. She's going to be fine. You know that, right? She's tough. Nearly took me out. She won't have a problem against those goons. I can't help it. I worry about her, I responded, clenching my fist. I get it. She's your mate. He spoke. his voice softer than normal. But you need to understand that Hailey, she can protect her damn self. That's for sure. You should be proud of her and showing her off, not trying to hide her by saying you're protecting her. I am protecting her, I exclaimed, my wolf growling at the male in front of us who is questioning the way we treat our mate. Luke held his hands up in surrender. I didn't say you aren't. All I'm saying is that maybe you can be a bit overbearing at times, and that she's a free spirit. Sometimes you need to let her roam. With that, he left me standing out on the deck by myself. I gripped the railing tightly as a breeze passed through, and I strained to catch even a fraction of the scent of Hailey, but found nothing. She was so close, but just out of reach, and it killed me. It kills me to know that she's out there alone, and I can't protect her. Maybe Luke is right. Maybe I am overbearing. Lily came up beside me, placing her hand over top of mine. You need to calm down. Chase, you're worrying the entire pack with your behavior. We can all feel it through the link. I'm sorry, I muttered, hanging my head. I can't even keep it together for my pack. Don't be. She smiled, her hand on my cheek. Listen, big brother, there's a lot at stake here. I understand you're worried. So let me tell you this. Hailey doesn't need your help right now. The pack does. So pull your head out of your ass and start acting like the alpha I know you are. I gave a low warning growl and she smiled, a twinkle in her eye. There he is. That's the Alpha Chase Morgan I know. I can't promise the pack anything. I finally released the thought from the back of my mind out loud. I can't guarantee their safety or survival, but you can promise to give them all that you are. She smiled up at me. And trust me, that's a lot. Alpha, the hunters just found Luna. A tracker's voice spoke in my mind. I snapped my eyes to Lily. It's time. She nodded and followed me through the house, where bunches of people began to stand, stretching out and cracking bones, getting ready to fight. You know, I started, looking over at Lily. You didn't have to hit her so hard. My sister smiled at me. She told me to make it count. We'll make this count, all right. Chapter 39. Things were beginning to get a little hazy, and it was growing increasingly harder to move my feet as all of the blood in my body drained towards my head. My usually perfect vision was blurred as I looked around the woods in anticipation. I wished they would just show up already. Wiggling around a little bit, I ended up swinging in a circle, dizzying me farther. Maybe that wasn't my brightest idea, but I was desperate to get some circulation in my feet. My mind wandered aimlessly as I waited the hunter's arrival, straying the paths of what is deemed normal. Most people don't worry about the double cross they're about to pull, or whether their werewolf boyfriend and his family and pack will make it out of this alive. No, most people on a Friday night are out with friends or on a date or even staying in and getting some relaxation time. But instead, I'm here, dangling upside down from a tree and thinking about the impending doom that was about to be unleashed. It's up to me now, to secure whose doomsday it will be. And I am prepared, at least I think I am. My mind seemed to keep tugging at the familiar path that is Chase. His sandy, curly, messy hair and his blue eyes that seem to carry more weight than the oceans when he looks at me. He's mesmerizing, and I feel myself sinking deeper and deeper into a pit with him. Maybe it's this mate bond that all werewolves obsess over. Or perhaps it's just me and my mundane but extraordinary feelings for him. Either way, I am certain that I am completely and inexplicably in love with that boy. And he has no idea of the effect he has on me. Finally, I heard it. The soft pitter-patter of Hunter's feet through the woods, stepping softly on leaves and avoiding twigs and anything that could crack beneath their shoes. It was hard to make out faces at first, but I could tell there were only 3 of them, all men. As expected, Joel's face was the first I could distinguish as he stood in the middle of the three of them, looking at me with a smirk on his face. "Oh, Hailey? What have you done this time?" I glared at him. "Just get me the fuck out of this." He sighed before nodding his head to the guy on his left, who cut the rope, dropping me to the forest floor with a thump. "I appreciate the gentleness," I did sarcastically, and the man smiled cheekily. Joel ignored my remark. "Well, Hales, you gonna tell me what happened, or do I have to guess?" He was waiting in my room when I got back to the house, I stated, the well-rehearsed lies flowing easily through my lips. "Hit me in the eye and knocked me out." "Who is he?" the third guy asked, interrupting my story. "The alpha. Dumbass." I spat. As I was saying, he knocked me out and dragged me here with a couple of other wolves. They were animals, nearly killed me with their filthy paws around my throat. Then they just let go and tied me up. And that son of a bitch looked me straight in the eye and said he knows there's more of us, that you'd find me, and that I have a message to deliver. "What's the message?" Joel questioned apprehensively. I could tell he wasn't quite looking forward to my answer. He said, "I am the only warning you'll get." He said to get off his land, or he'll rip all of our throats out with his bare hands. He said that if we don't leave, after today there will be no more hunters left in existence. I spoke, although they didn't know that it was really me delivering my own threat, and not just Chase's. The two other men looked furious, as if they wanted to tear off my head along with all of the werewolves in this pack, my pack. Joel nodded stiffly. "We need to get back. Tell the chief." The chief. Intrigue sparked as we walked back to the yellow house, Joel strangely sticking close to me as the other two walked behind us. There was an undeniable tension between them, and I couldn't help but wonder what it was all about. Did they have a problem with each other? A disagreement about what was going on here? Or are their overinflated egos just getting in the other's way? As we strolled up to the back of the house, I really took in how many hunters had shown up. There had to be nearly 2, and I knew that meant Chase's odds of survival had just decreased. But I couldn't think about that right now. Right now, I need to convince everyone of my story, and that I am on their side. Curtis, the first hunter that had shown up, glared at me as I walked through the makeshift campsite, with his men behind him mimicking the same expression. I have a lot of convincing to do. Joel sat me down at what I presumed to be his sleeping bag and handed me a wet rag, which I used to wipe of the sweat and dirt from my face, wincing as I hit the tender area around my left eye. Lily hit so hard, I was genuinely scared to ever piss her off. "So, how's the chief?" I asked lowly, in a whisper as Joel dug through a small box. "Is he everything everyone has ever imagined?" He looked up at me with a strange look in his eye, like he wanted to tell me something, but something was stopping him. "He's good. Almost a father-like figure to a lot of guys here. Actually, do you know who he is?" I continued to push. "Kinda," he said with a shrug. "David knew him, though. Gave him a big-ass hug when he stepped off his fancy little helicopter. Speak of the devil, and he shall appear." David stepped up in front of us, looking pissed off. "What the fuck happened?" "Hailey." Everyone around quieted down, standing as they stared. I rose to my feet, staring challengingly at David. "Well, you see, I was abducted by their fucking alpha, beaten and then threatened to deliver a message, all the while being hung from a tree by my feet. So sorry if I forgot to send you a quick text to let you know what was going on." "What's the message?" he ground out, trying to stay strong and uphold his power in front of this crowd, but I could see him crumbling from the inside. "Their alpha said we have the rest of the night to leave, or else he'll kill of us," I answered, putting extra emphasis on the word alpha as I tried to make my distaste clear. Murmuring began to grow around the crowd, and I called out to silence them. Stepping in front of David, "My fellow hunters, hear me. We have an opportunity here to take down what I have come to learn to be the strongest pack in the Continental Us. If we do this, not only will we make this a better place for future generations, but we will become legends. I am prepared to cut off as many heads as necessary, and now I ask you all who's with me." The men cheered, raising their fists in defiance, and I smirked smugly, not at their bloodlust, but at their willingness to believe me and their idiocy as they were about to walk into their own deaths. My job was complete. Suddenly a hush fell over the crowd as a path cleared, and I turned to Joel. "Confused?" He mouthed the answer to me in a single syllable. "Chief." Turning, I stared at the man with 3 claw marks across the side of his face as he marched towards me. Many men behind him. My voice cracked as I spoke. Dad, Chapter 40. When a wolf marks his mate, he can feel everything she does. It's like a mental tether on steroids between the pair. He can feel her pain or pleasure and can tell when she's distressed. I could feel her distress. Hailey was freaking out somewhere, panicking. Almost, and I couldn't do a damn thing to help her. My chest was tight and I felt as though tears were about to spill over as I reached out to her through the bond. Whatever was happening right now, it's taking a tremendous toll on her. My head was fuzzy, like I couldn't get a clear picture, and I knew it meant she must be disoriented as well. Something came up that she had never in a million years expected to happen, and I need to figure out what, before it's too late. The pack was gathering in the yard, my people in skin and wolf form alike, slowly straggling in, coming in a staggered manner to avoid the hunters. Hailey might be on the inside, but there's still too many of them for us to get our hopes up just yet. A brutal fight is coming. I could practically smell it in the air and sense it on everyone around me. The only question remaining is who will be the ones left standing when it's all over. My wolf growled at the thought, for we knew the answer, the only option. We would be the ones left standing in the end. I stood in front of my pack, watching as everyone capable of fighting poured into the green space, rapidly filling it up. They all stood at attention, waiting for me to speak and officially declare this war we are about to wage. Some eyes held fear, others anticipation or even hunger. There was a large spectrum of emotions surging through the crowd before me, and so I pushed my own as well as Hailey's to the back of my mind. This is my pack, and I will do whatever it takes to protect them. Luke came up to me, nodding in respect as we stood in front of almost the entire pack. "Alpha, everyone is accounted for. We're ready." I nodded and turned, facing my people. Men and women, boys and girls. I began, "I won't lie to you. This is going to get messy. People will die today, as much as it kills me to say it. Some of us here will die today. Let it be known that I am willing to lay down my life for each and every one of you. You are not my subjects, no matter what some alphas may believe. You all are my family, and it pains me to have to ask this of you. But I need you to fight with me. This is war. Don't kid yourself and try to say otherwise. They have brought in each and every one of their hunters to take us down, but I refuse to let that happen. We will kill them all. We will rip them apart one by one, until there is nothing left of them to break. You all know that hunters killed my parents, your former Alpha and Luna. I won't let them tread on top of us anymore." I took a deep breath as tears began to pool in my eyes. My wolf howled and sad the thought of losing the good people before me. Tonight, we become the hunters. We track every last son of a bitch down and get them with our claws, with our teeth, with our goddamn bare hands. We show them what it's like for every bone in their body to break. We show them what it's like to be preyed upon. We show them what true hunters look like. They believe we're nothing but vicious animals without a conscience. Tonight, just this once, let's prove them right. Tonight, we unleash the beasts within every single one of us, and we won't stop until every blade of grass around them is painted red with their blood. The wolves in front of me howled as those remaining in their skin cheered loudly, and it was so loud I was sure the hunters could hear us clear as day from their little camp out at Hailey's house. They know we're coming, I shouted out, bringing the crowd back down to a silence. Although everyone was now buzzing with energy, that's not a problem. We go. We attack. We kill. It's as simple as that. They may believe they're ready for what's coming, but nothing could ever prepare anyone for what we are about to unleash upon them. The cheers began again, and I nodded before shouting out, "Shift." The sounds of bones cracking filled the air as everyone began to phase into their wolf, leaving only me in my skin. I snarled and leapt forward, shifting in midair. Growling, I let out a vicious bark before turning and sprinting off to the hunters, to Hailey, to victory. But almost immediately, something was wrong. Arrows whizzed through the air, striking wolves all around me. One grazed my shoulder, and I snarled as the silver burned the flesh it managed to skim. I looked over and saw Luke running by my side. An arrow embedded in his shoulder already? Shit. I reached out to Hailey through the bond, trying to get any feel whatsoever of what was happening. This many hunters should not be in the trees. I snarled and opened up my mind to the pack link now. Bodies of hunters began falling from the trees, their throats and hearts torn out. We were getting into the thick of the woods, where we had wolves stationed up in the trees, waiting for my cue to strike and let us pass. It was Hailey's idea, and right now I was really glad I listened. I could smell blood and growled as my sprint slowed to a jog, passing to hunters with their throats slit cleanly with a blade. Did Hailey do this? I couldn't even catch the faintest trace of her scent and released a howl as a hunter took me by surprise, jumping on my back and striking me with a silver knife. Rolling over, I crushed him under my back, tearing his head off with my teeth as I regained my footing. I spat the head out to Luke, who gave me a sadistic wolfish grin before yanking the blade out with his teeth. Letting out the equivalent of a grunt, I pushed forward, racing towards her house. We were almost there. I could see the hard littered with a little over 1 man standing at the ready with weapons, and I could see the little yellow house. Hailey stood out on the balcony of the 2nd floor, screaming at a man with a scar on his face. The chief. And then she punched him before diving off the balcony, just as the entire house exploded, throwing me back, as well as forcing all of the hunters to the ground. My ears were ringing and my vision was clouded by smoke. Flames engulfed the home and I jumped back up to my feet immediately, sniffing the air for Hailey. What the hell did she just do? Chapter 41. You're dead. I breathed out in shock, tears pooling in my eyes as I took a step back when he continued to approach me. My father, you're supposed to be dead. I watched you die? He watched me with calculating eyes, watching my every move as if he were a hawk. It pissed me off. I stormed over to him and shoved him back, an action that led half the hunters around us to pull out their guns and train their sights on my head. He staggered back slightly, but didn't even come close to falling. Hailey, you need to take a breath. Why don't you come on inside with me? Turning on his heel, he walked back through the crowd, expecting me to follow. With a final huff, I trudged forward, following him. I need some goddamn answers, and I needed them yesterday. We passed through the kitchen, and as we did so, I bumped into the oven, turning on the gas. The man in front of me may look like me father, but he acted nothing like him. I needed a way out, and there was only one option for me: cutting in front of him. I walked upstairs and through David's room to the balcony overlooking the backyard. A clear view, an easy escape and a vantage point, all things a hunter is trained to look for in dangerous situations. "Hailey," he started, placing a hand on my shoulder. "I just want to tell you that I am so proud of you. You have turned into a beautiful, strong, young woman and amazing hunter. You are everything I could have hoped for you to be." I looked up at him, my eyes hard. "What the hell is going on? I watched you die?" "I know I did. Alone with Mom. I was almost dead." He nodded, retracting his hand from my arm, for which I was grateful. Half of the bones in my body were broken. I barely had any blood in my body left, and there was a hole in my heart, literally, but David found me, and he managed to get me to a hospital where they saved me. I was in a coma for 3 months, because of all the strenuous surgeries my body had overcome. By that time, you were already training with David, on your way to becoming the best hunter we have. It was then that Richard came to me. He was the previous chief, an old man, and he was dying. You already thought I was dead. Even David thought I had died in one of the surgeries. And I could see that your mother and I's passing only motivated you. So I kept quiet and stuck to the shadows. I never really left you alone, Hailey. I was always watching you, giving you tasks and challenging you. I pushed you like I always have. Even if I wasn't there personally, I wish I could have been there. Sweetheart, I really do. What about Mom? I asked, my throat tightening with emotion, but I refused to let him see me cry. He left without a second thought, left me on my own to become a murderer while he sat back behind the curtains and told me who I should kill. I was disgusted, and I could barely recognize the man in front of me. A man I had once looked up to with every fiber of my being now stood before me, and any and all respect I had previously held for him vanished. Your mother really did die that night, Hailey. He answered my question. I wish that wasn't the case. But they ripped her throat out before I could do anything. Why didn't you find me sooner? I challenged, pushing harder for more information. He wasn't getting off the hook that easily. He gave me a sad look, almost as if he'd pitied me or something, tilting his head at an angle. Sweetheart, I already told you. You were growing up so strong. I didn't want to mess with that. So why now? Why are you here after all this time? Why not just stay dead? I yelled. Because family and love. He gestured between us. It's all a distraction. You know better than anyone that losing the people you love hurts you to the point when you can barely go on. I couldn't risk your success as a hunter just to be your father. No, you just let me believe I was an orphan for the past 3 years. I screamed with wet anger. I wasn't just cold and angry. I was fuming. I was heated and heartbroken, and tears began to pool in my eyes again. You left me alone. You had David, he reasoned, and Joel. I let out a sardonic laugh. I didn't want them, though. All I wanted was to have my parents, and you didn't even give me a choice. You assumed you knew what was best for me, and you assumed wrong. We were alone now. The men that had been following him left. They were probably uncomfortable with the situation. I could see the wolfsbane grenade clipped to his waistband, and my idea finally began to formulate. The grenade itself wouldn't blow up, just shatter the glass, sending a spray of wolfsbane and shards of glass flying in an attempt to take out a large number of wolves. But if the spark goes off close enough to the gas from the stove, it could set off a chain reaction. He sighed. Hailey, please, no. Stop. I exclaimed. You don't get to try and explain yourself anymore. You lost that right when you let me believe you died and made no attempt to even try and contact me. I wanted to, but I couldn't. He shouted back. I could barely function after I lost your mother. I was scared. Hailey, scared that I was going to lose you too. I wanted to yell back. I wanted to tell him that he already lost me and that he can't get me back. But just as I was about to, I felt a sharp pain in my back, almost like I was being stabbed, and I let out a gasp. Pain contorted my face and he looked at me in concern. It was Chase's pain I was feeling. It was almost as though he was reaching out to me. It must be the mate bond, I thought. I guess I should thank you then, I stated. If you hadn't left me back then, I wouldn't be as strong as I am now. That's all I wanted for you. He smiled. Nodding his head, Eric Hargent approached me and wrapped me in his arms, an action at which I stiffened. Slowly, I loosened up, just enough to maneuver my hand and grab his wolfsbane grenade. It's now or never. Stepping back, I pushed him off of me a little and glared at him, but I never wanted it for myself. You are no father of mine. With that, I brought my fist up to connect with his jaw, forcing him to the ground. Pulling the clip off the grenade, I rolled it to the hallway, where it ignited, and the spark grew. Smiling at my success, I dove off of the balcony as the building house me went up in flames. I landed on top of a tent and was surrounded by the canvas material, along with flames and smoke. Gunfire began and I knew that this was it. The wolves were here. The hunters were shooting and my life was ablaze. It was now or never. Chapter 42. There was smoke everywhere. Every breath I took was filled with smoke and I nearly gagged as I inhaled some wolfsbane along with it. The flames engulfing the house danced before my eyes, taunting me as my eyes frantically darted around, trying to find her, trying to find Hailey. The hunters began shooting at random without any relaying, just hoping that a bullet finds its mark in our bodies. I could feel her, and I knew she was still alive, but I just didn't know where. The shooting stopped, and for a silent minute or two, nobody moved. There wasn't a faltering step or a move forward. It was a picture-perfect example of a stalemate. We both waited for the other to make the first move so that we could be the ones to retaliate. Finally, I heard the click of someone loading a gun and cocking it. Snarling lowly, I knew the rest of my pack on the front line with me had heard it too. Letting out a deafening roar, I leapt forward with my pack behind me, tearing into the necks of the murderous men in front of me. The noise seemed to fade away as I charged forward, slicing with my claws and tearing with my teeth. I dug through flesh, clamping down with my jaw as I crushed bones beneath them. It felt amazing to finally set myself free and release all of the anger and hurt their kindness caused me since they killed my parents and my pack. Everything that has gone wrong in my life has been because of a hunter. And now I am getting my revenge. My canines are sunk deep in the jugular or a hunter when another shot a silver bullet at me. Luckily, their aim was shit as it hit my front leg. Howling, I released the hunter from my jaws. He would die from blood loss soon enough. I turned my attention towards the other hunter, who was rushing to reload his shotgun before I could get to him. Snarling viciously, I launched myself at him. He yelled back, dropping his gun and thrusting a silver knife into my side, right in between two ribs. Letting out a howl, I swiped at him and raked his entire chest with my claws. He let out an agonized cry, staggering back away from me. But it was too late. He was in my line of sight, and I was seeing red and craving more. More blood and more death. As I charged him and leapt forward, he dropped to the ground and rolled out of my way. My chest vibrated with a growl as I turned to face him, only to take another silver bullet, this time to the shoulder. No, I heard her. Hailey yelled out as I was shot and she thrusted her dagger, which landed square in the back of the hunter in front of me. He sputtered a bit of blood before falling forward, clearly dead. Hailey was covered in what looked like ash with a small cut across her forehead. She was panting and breathing heavily. She nodded to me in acknowledgement, a glint of mischief in her eyes. I barked out a thank you to her before looking for a new target, someone else to sink my teeth in. "She's fine," my wolf cooed. Hailey was perfectly fine and alive for the time being. Putting my incessant worry for her aside for a little while, I set my sights on a hunter spraying bullet after bullet into my pack. Roaring, I charged it at him from behind and he turned to slow, just in time for me to tear his head from his shoulders in an instant. "I see your signature move hasn't gone anywhere," Luke commented over the mind link, referring to my 4th decapitation of the night. Smirking, I chuckled, and I never plan on stopping it. Wolves were everywhere, and I could see blurs of fur scrambling throughout the area, blood spraying all around. It really was an all-out war. The hunters were falling and crumbling apart. They were used to stalking their prey before striking swiftly, but in close, hand-to-hand combat they were practically useless. They didn't stand a chance against the massive wolves coming against them. Suddenly I felt a stabbing pain through my hind leg and I whipped my head around, only to find nothing. No one was behind me ripping my leg open. "Hailey." I tried reaching out to her through the bond. I could feel her pain and the panic inside of her. Something was going really wrong. Growling, I took off from the yard behind the ever-burning house. My pack had this taken care of. That much was clear. Now it was time for me to take care of my mate. She was hurt somewhere, and I needed to save her. She can take care of herself. I know, but with the panic and sheer terror I was getting from her, something was very off. I began sprinting through the trees, frantically trying to find her. It wasn't just her leg hurting her, but her heart as well, and all I wanted to do was help her. I have to help my mate. Chapter 43. I rolled over onto my back and groaned, touching my fingers to my head and pulling them back to find blood lathering them. Sighing, I looked around me and saw the hunters firing upon the wolves, but the wolves weren't taking shit. Smiling with what seemed like pride, I brought myself to a stand and brought my bow with me. Drawing the string back, I looked around to see a hunter with his knife raised against a wolf. Releasing the string, I watched as the arrow launched itself into his hand, sticking out and causing him to drop the knife. The wolf took its opportunity and sprang up, ripping his neck out. Chase was easy to pick out. I was all but drawn to him as he fought in a frenzy of anger and savagery. I wasn't going to lie. It was actually a bit of a turn-on watching him tear into all of the two-faced bastards here. Then again, I'd be a hypocrite if I said I wasn't two-faced. He was digging into a hunter when a shot went off and his front leg buckled. He turned to face the hunter, who was frantically trying to reload his shotgun but failing. Chase roared, leaping towards the hunter, who in a split-second decision dropped the gun and pulled out a dagger, thrusting it into Chase's side. He dropped to the ground and spun around, only to receive another shot to the shoulder by the hunter's handgun. "No," I yelled, watching the scene in front of me unfold. Without thinking, I lifted a dagger of my own and threw it with expert precision. The blade sliced through the air until it embedded itself into the back of the hunter. He sputtered for a moment before dropping to the ground. Chase looked at me, his eyes sparkling, and he barked out at me, which I took as a thank you. He then turned and went back to tearing Hunter's limb from limb. I went my own way, sneaking through the forest, looking for anyone to help and any hunters to fend off. A low growl reverberated from behind me, and I slowly turned to see a medium-sized black wolf standing there, muscles tense and coiled, his eyes looking murderous. I held up my hands, showing there was no weapon. "Listen, I'm on your side here." The volume of the growl grew. "Are you really now?" A male voice from behind me spoke. Whipping around once again, I came face to face with the chief. My father. The wolf behind me snarled loudly, and I could only hope he hated the man before me more than he hates me. He held his crossbow up and aimed it at me, before moving it over slightly and training it on the wolf. Stupidly, I stepped in front of the wolf. "Stop. What do you think you're doing?" he shouted, his face reddening with anger through the dark night. Although the smoke and fire from the house seemed to lighten things. "Protecting my people," I stated firmly. His grip on the crossbow tightened. "That is not one of your people. Hailey, that is a werewolf. Nothing but a mindless, murdering animal." I shook my head. "You're wrong. They are people, and they're good people. You're the bad guy here." "Not them." He didn't understand, and he never would. I knew that much, but I needed to distract him. Keep him talking long enough for the wolf behind me to make its escape. Behind my back, I gently motioned for the wolf to go. "They killed your mother," he exclaimed. I shook my head. "No, you killed my mother by bringing her into this world. If you hadn't been hunting, they never would have targeted our family. Mom's death is on you, and no one else. So stop trying to blame everyone around you. You've lost it, and you need to calm down. And this now, and maybe they'll spare your life." At that, something inside him snapped. "Spare my life? As if you think they could ever get to me." He let out a maniacal cackle before sending the bow flying, straight through my thigh. I let out a wail, dropping to the ground, letting out another cry as the wolf behind me dropped as well, a different arrow embedded in his head. "No," I cried out. A howl pierced in the night followed my cry, and I knew it was Chase. I could sense he was close, but not close enough. David jogged into the clearing, Joel right behind them, and I found myself faced with 3 men that I knew were very strict hunters. I was a goner for sure. Taking a rock in my hand, I found my next best option. I launched it at the chief, who was unexpecting, as the rock hit him square in the forehead, knocking him out. "What the hell?" David ground out, walking over and yanking me up by the arm. I hissed at the pain of my leg and glared at him. I had to. The bastard fucking shot an arrow through my leg. Not through it. Joe spoke. "It's still very much in there." He walked over and broke the tip off before yanking it back out. I bit back a scream as he did so, and blood began to flow more freely from the wounds. I could only hope he didn't hit an artery, but I was pretty sure he didn't. "Why did he shoot you?" David pressed, and I could see Joel's ears perk up a bit at that question. So I gave my answer. "Hell if I know. He was rambling on about how they killed my mom and then shot me before taking down him over there." I pointed to the lifeless wolf across the way, and a pang of guilt struck me. I couldn't save him. How the hell am I even supposed to save myself right now? That doesn't sound like the man I know, David decided, looking at me skeptically. He held his gun out, and I could tell his was cocked and very well loaded. Shit. Hobbling back to the ground, I grabbed my leg in pain and hoped that it would buy me enough distraction time to pull out a knife at least. So I went down and cradled my leg, hand slipping into my boot. Just as I had pulled the blade from my boot, I heard the safety of the gun clicking off. I looked up to see David standing, his gun pointed at my head. But what surprised me was seeing Joel standing with his gun against David's head, who looked very pissed. "What the fuck are you doing?" David ground out, his grip on the gun tightening. "Fighting for what's right," he said. "You see? I might not be a genius, but I know what's right or wrong. And it took seeing Hailey with the wolves to help me realize it. There's more to it." I spoke up. Joel shrugged. The other hunters were bloodthirsty just for the hell of it. They didn't have a vendetta against the wolves. They just wanted to kill. And that's not okay, because as you yourself have come to realize, Hailey, they're people too. They have families, and friends and people who care if they make it back in one piece. I'm sick of taking people away from the world. Where the fuck did I go wrong with you two? David wondered out loud, though his anger was still very clear and present. It flipped through the air at that time, interrupting the argument, and I could hear the ringing of a gunshot and the sound of a body drop. But my vision was starting to blur in the frenzy of it all, and probably partially due to my blood loss. But the gunshot was clear, and so was the look of agony in the face of Chase's wolf. Chapter 44. I've never ran as fast as I was right now, frantically trying to locate my mate. I could sense her and smell her, but it was like she was everywhere and nowhere all at the same time. It was devastating. Letting out a growl of frustration, I slowed to a saunter, trying to get any red on her at all. Finally, I heard it, that heavenly chime of her voice calling, only she was screaming no. I could hear her yell. She sounded frantic. She was still fair, and her yell sounded as though it was a whisper. But that only motivated me. It motivated me to push, to keep running to her, to Hailey. Scenarios were running through my head, and not the good kinds. The kinds where I wondered if I would get there too late, if she would be on the ground by the time I got there, and it would be another moment to mark in the books when I was just too late to save someone I love. Pushing harder, I witched through the greens and browns of the woods. My fur legs worked in unison to propel myself forward as quickly as possible. I was closer now. She was just feet away, and my heart began pounding in my chest even harder. I couldn't even tell if it was because of me or her, but panic began spreading from my body. I could hear the voices of two other men. I was pretty sure one of them belonged to the guy she had sparred with in our yard the one day, but I couldn't be certain. Bursting through the clearing, I arrived just as a gun went off, and I toppled to the ground, right in front of Hailey, who looked at me with wide eyes. For one of the first times, she looked genuinely scared. My face contorted into one of agony as I registered the pain I was experiencing. My legs ached, my body feeling heavy after all of the silver I had taken in from the hunter's weapons. But most of all, I felt the pain of a silver bullet that had just embedded itself in my lung, right beside my heart. I shifted back to my human form, lying on my stomach as I groaned in pain, not worried about my nudity. Looking away from Hailey, I was confused at the sight before me. David, Hailey's uncle, laid on the ground, a bullet-sized hole through the side of his head, while the chief stood facing off with Joel, the guy from Hailey's backyard. She let out a slight cry, but the two men paid no attention to her as they stood facing each other with their guns trained on one another, their arms and bodies generally tight and displaying the tension of the situation. Hailey came up next to me, cupping my cheek in her hand. "Are you okay?" Giving her a meek smile, I coughed. "Some blood coming up with hit. Just peachy." She gave a light laugh through the tears that were starting to spill over, and she stroked my cheek. "I'm not gonna lie. Chase, you look like shit." I laughed, but immediately regretted it as the pain shot through my entire body. The bullet shifting. I was familiar with pain, but this seemed to reach a whole other level. Closing my eyes for a few moments, I knew what was coming. The big, bad, unavoidable, and inevitable end. Death. Hailey, get away from that thing," the chief yelled out at her. Without flinching or even looking up, she shook her head and continued to stroke my cheek with her thumb. And God, I never wanted her to stop. But then that asshole pulled out another gun and trained it on her. I said, "Get away." She let out a sob, then stood up, putting all of her weight on her left side. I growled a little at the sight of a rather large hole going straight through her thigh. I could see the remainder of the arrow that had done the damage on the ground next to her. and across the way laid a dead wolf, an arrow through its head. "You don't control me anymore," she said in a murderous voice. Picking up her own bow from the ground, she loaded an arrow, her last one, and aimed it at the chief. "You might be the man who brought me into this world, but that does not make you my father. My father never would have left me without either of my parents." "You had David," he exclaimed, exasperated. Hailey shook her head. "No, I didn't want David. Didn't even need him. I needed my fucking parents. But you made sure that would never happen, didn't you?" "Hailey." "Honey," he started, but was cut off by Joel. "Oh, enough. I'm sick of listening to your bullshit." "Man," he spat. "You were so hellbent on killing every werewolf ever. You never stopped to think about whether it's them or us who deserve to die. And guess what? It's not them. They're all good, decent people. Look at that poor son of a bitch who just took a fucking bullet in the chest for Hailey. If it wasn't for him and his kind, your daughter would be dead. Just like David here." "No," he said, in denial as he shook his head, and his hands began to follow suit. "They all have to pay for what they are." "You make me sick," Hailey stated, any happiness and light that I had always seen in her face gone. She was void and null of any emotion at this point. "You want to pass your judgment on every werewolf in existence? Well, I'll pass my judgment on to you. You deserve to die, and no one else." With those final words, she released the arrow and I could hear it make its mark. Within seconds of the sound of his body hitting the ground, she spun around and emptied her stomach onto the grass, falling to her knees and allowing the sobs to consume her. Reaching out, I grazed her hand with mine as she turned to face me. Her eyes were red, matching the crimson color that stained her hands and clothes. She sniffled, then wiped her eyes with the backs of her hands, dragging herself over to me. "You're okay, right? You're going to be fine. This is nothing, right?" I couldn't tell her that in all honesty I was cold, and the pain was disappearing, because I knew that meant I was almost there, almost at the doors of death. She wiped her nose on her sleeve, and her voice cracked as she spoke. "Cha, AC." Smiling sadly, I looked up into her eyes, if only for the last time. "I love you, Hailey." Nodding, her lip quivered as she squeezed my hand tightly. Sobbing, my eyes grew heavy and I finally gave in on closing them. But I stayed conscious long enough to hear it, to hear her final words to me. "I love you. To Chase. More than you know. Chapter 45. Oh God. He's dead. Isn't he?" I couldn't even move. I was so stricken with fear and panic. The image of his eyes folding shut and his breathing slowing flashed through my mind every waking second. And all I wanted to do was give in and join him. But I couldn't, because he was still breathing. But barely. I wanted to scream and yell for help. I wanted to beg for mercy from whatever higher power or some shit decided to do this to me. But I couldn't, because I was practically paralyzed. There was no energy in me to move or even speak. I just held Chase's hand as tightly as I could in my own and focused on not passing out as my leg and other various scratches continued to bleed profusely. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe he did hit an artery. Joel came up beside me. "Shit. Hailey, what do we do? What do I do? Hailey. Hailey. Look at me. Stay with me here. Fuck. Hailey, come on. I need your help." I couldn't even look at him, couldn't even manage to turn my head and meet his eyes. Every muscle and bone in my body ached, and I felt like I was being pushed down into the earth by a hot, steaming pressure plate. I wondered if I was feeling some of Chase's pain, because there was no way I felt this from a few scratches and an arrow through the thigh. No way. The world began to move in slow motion, and I could hear Joel still yelling, trying to get me to look at him, move or say anything. But right now I was immobilized, lying on my stomach and staring at Chase's too pale face. His color was steadily being drained and his breathing decreased and grew more ragged and harsh as it did so. And there was absolutely nothing I could do to save him right now. I felt tears drop down my cheeks, and I honestly couldn't tell if I had been crying the whole time or if they had just started again. I squeezed my eyes shut, only to relive the events of the past 5 minutes. David shooting his gun at me, Chase leaping in front of me and taking the bullet, Joel shooting and killing David, my father waking up and training his gun on me, then shifting it to Joel, me killing my father. No, I chided myself. He's not my father. He was the chief, and nothing more to me. Nothing more. Maybe I should just be nothing, and give in to all of the pain and pressure. Maybe I should give in to the boiling feeling that spread throughout my entire body. But then I looked at his face, and knew I could never do that. I have to be strong, if not for myself, then for Chase. Help! I mustered up a whimper. I winced at the pain but continued, my voice growing louder tenfold. Help! I sobbed, a strangled cry coming from my lips that I didn't even recognize. I shrieked once more, somebody help. Joel had stopped yelling now and sat beside me, holding my free hand, and I knew it meant I was royally fucked. He had given up because he knew I would probably die from blood loss anytime soon now. You're gonna be fine. Hales, he muttered. You're both going to be just fine. It didn't matter that the words were most definitely not true. They comforted me somehow. They got me through the next few moments of pain, where I felt as though a white-hot barbed wire wrapped itself around my heart. I knew I was feeling Chase's pain, and this must mean that the silver has reached his heart, that the bullet shifted and is now piercing his heart, killing him. Tears silently escaped me as I stared at his face, despite all of this pain. He still looked so peaceful, probably because he passed out and isn't feeling any of this. Picking up my hand and dragging it across the ground, I rested it on his face, cupping his cheek. I whispered, "Fight, Chase. Please, please. I need you to fight. I know it hurts and all you want to do is give in to it and let it consume you. But you can't. Please don't leave me. Golly, ease." My voice cracked at the end and I let out a small sob, sniffling to cover it up as I heard twigs all around us snap. What the fuck? A voice questioned. And I never thought I'd be so glad to hear his voice. Luke's face appeared across from me, hovering above Chase as he looked at me in panic. "Hailey, I need you to tell me exactly what happened so we can fix this." He jumped. I hiccuped through the crying. He jumped in front of me and took the bullet. It's piercing his heart and I can feel it. I can feel everything. Wiping a straight arrow away from his face, Luke nodded. "Thank you. Duck's almost here. Okay? So you and Chase? You gotta hold on just a little bit longer. You have to be strong for him. Hailey." "I'm trying." I croaked. He nodded. "You're doing great." The next few minutes were the longest of my life. Joel and Luke both spoke words of encouragement as I pushed through the pain, trying just to stay awake and to offer some of my strength to chase through our bond. I understood now why werewolves were so protective of their mates, and why they were so angry if they managed to live after their other half died. It drains you, emotionally and physically. Chase was the one on the brink of death here, but I might as well have been on my deathbed too. Finally, Ammon with a large bag of supplies burst into the clearing, looking frantic. He was sweating, although his breathing seemed steady enough. Luke sprung into action, pointing every which way. ordering all the wolves around and yelling in the man's face. He didn't seem bothered at all by it, though, as he trained his eyes on Chase, and then on me. He walked over, kneeling down on the other side of Chase and looking at me. "Luna, I am going to do everything I can to save him. Okay? I need you to let go and back away. I need space to work." I nodded in understanding, but I didn't have the strength to move. The man, Doc, looked over to Luke, who walked over and picked me up, sitting me up against a tree in a position so that I could see everything they were doing to him. I squirmed as I watched the man rack a blade down the front of his chest. Luke squatted in front of me and I looked at him, shaking my head. He wasn't going to make it. I wasn't going to make it. The earth began spinning, the edges going black. I could feel myself slipping into the depths of unconsciousness. Goodbye. Chapter 46. Have you ever felt like dying? Or at least, have you ever been in so much pain you felt like you were going to die? Because that's exactly how I'm feeling right now. Maybe that's because I actually am dying. My mind wandered through the dark unconsciousness, but I still knew what was happening. I knew how I had left things, Hailey crying above me and the silver bullet in my chest all but digging its way into my heart. It's sort of like Hailey, in that sense, though she didn't have to do much digging. The pain was beginning to reach that point where I couldn't take it anymore and I wanted to give into it, get into the darkness surrounding me. But then I heard it. Hailey's voice. "Stay with me." Her voice was faint, barely a whisper, but I knew it was hers. "Please don't leave me." I wanted to scream, yell and fight. I wanted to grab her by the face and swear to her that I won't ever leave her side. I wanted to kiss her passionately and love her with every fiber of my being. I wanted to show her exactly how much she means to me. But I couldn't. I couldn't move. Couldn't speak, and I couldn't even open my damn eyes to see her. A shredding feeling burst through my chest, and that's when I really knew I had lost this final battle. I screamed and fought and kicked, but nothing worked. I couldn't wake up and couldn't get to her. I was nothing. And so I gave in and let myself slip away completely. Maybe I'd see her on the other side someday. But giving in didn't lead to darkness like I had expected, but rather with me standing in a plain white room, a red wooden door across from me. The door called to me, pulled me with so much force I wasn't sure what to do other than walk to it. Placing my hand on the doorknob, I twisted it and pushed the door open. Immediately I was greeted with a familiar sweet perfume, which matched the familiar sweet face in front of me. I nearly choked. Mom, she walked up to me and wrapped me in her arms. "Oh, my baby." Despite the childish trailer, I didn't fight her and instead wrapped my arms around her even tighter. This wasn't real, but it still felt like it. It felt like she was here. "Come on, let's go sit with your father," she said, stepping back and giving me a view of my dad, sitting at the table behind her, smiling with 3 mugs in front of him. I nodded and followed her, sitting in between the two of them, sipping on the coffee. Mom smiled at me, that same old twinkle in her eyes. "Tell me everything about her." "What?" I questioned. Dad gave a hearty laugh. "Your mate, son. Your mother has been waiting, very impatiently. Might I add, to know all about this Hailey Argent." I smiled at the thought of her. She's amazing. Everything I ever could have asked for and more. Mom smiled encouragingly. She was a hunter, though, and things got rough. I frowned, recalling the night I had found out about her, when I had found that damn knife, placing her hand over mine. My mom smiled softly, but she changed her ways, didn't she? She saw you for the good man that you are, and showed her that hunting was not the right thing. I nodded. "Yeah? She helped us? Not just the pack, son. Dad clapped his hand on my shoulder. She helped you. I can see it. I have seen it. You changed so much. Even in the first moment you saw her. You finally became a man when you met her. No longer a childish boy. Gee, thanks. I spoke dryly at his words. He laughed, his eyes crinkling at the corners like they always did. You know, I'm just fucking with ya. Language? Mom chastised, earning laughs from both Dad and I. So you love her? Mom stated more than asked, but I still nodded. And she loves you. I felt back to my last waking moments with her, and her light voice telling me that she did love me too. More than I knew, apparently. I smiled at the bow. Yeah, I think she does. She threw me a disappointed look. Then what are you doing here? What? Why are you here with us dead folks? When you should be there with your very alive and waiting mate. Dad pressed, sipping on his coffee. I furrowed my brows. Wait a minute. Not dead. They both smiled at me sadly, and Dad answered, Not just yet, not just yet. My boy. I looked back at the red door. The only exit for me. Away back to Hailey. I could go back, live my life, be with Hailey and start a family sometime in the future. Or stay here, let everything go, and reunite with my parents. You know you'll come back, right? Mom spoke, grabbing my hands in hers. If you go back, you will die someday. And when you do, we'll still be here waiting for you. Yeah? I questioned. They both nodded, mocking their motion. I tilted my head up and down and took a deep breath, standing up and releasing it. I faced the red door, and my parents came up behind me, standing on either side, with their hands on my shoulders. I could feel them and their support coursing through me. I'm proud of you, son. You're a good alpha. My dad's voice boomed from my left side. Mom's angelic voice came from the right. I love you, Chase. You're a good man. I love you guys. And I miss you. I told them, looking from one another. And I know Lily does too. Mom smiled sadly, telling her hello for us, and that we love her so very much. Dad chimed in. I nodded and walked forward, placing my hand on that doorknob once again, this time knowing exactly where it was going to take me. Pulling it open, I stepped into the bright white room. Stepping into it, and suddenly I was falling, tumbling through open space until I wasn't. It was just darkness, with a beeping noise to keep me company. Peeling my eyes open, I found myself to be staring at a somewhat familiar white ceiling. Turning my head, I found what I was looking for. A cute brunette by my side, asleep sitting in a chair with her head on the bed, her hand tightly gripping mine. Chapter 47. It was a minute movement, barely noticeable at all, but the small twitch of the hand I held was enough to jolt me awake, lifting my head from the side of the bed. I locked eyes with a pair of shimmering blue ones. If I had been standing, my knees would have buckled, and I probably would have collapsed. Chase. He smiled down at me. That's my name. Don't wear it out. Unable to hold myself back, I launched my body at him, clinging to him as though he was air himself and I was drowning at the bottom of an ocean. He's alive, awake and in my arms. Thank God you're okay. I mumbled in his chest and he squeezed me back just as tight, if not tighter, as I was squeezing him. I don't know what I would have done if you didn't wake up. He gave me a sort of crooked smile and raised a brow at me. You really think I'd leave my girl behind? Letting out a small laugh. I shook my head. I guess not. Come here. He motioned and pulled me up to him, before planting his lips on mine. It was soft and tender at first, So gentle I wasn't even sure if it was kissing. Just as I was about to pull away, he brought me back in, grabbing my hips and hoisting me on top of him. The kiss turned ravenous and hungry, to the point where I wasn't sure if anything could ever break us apart. Of course, I had to be proved wrong as the door opened and someone cleared their throat. I smiled at the man I had come to know over the past week and slipped off of Chase and back into my seat. "Hey, Doc. Hailey, were you harming my patient?" He scolded as he walked into the other side of Chase's bed, shaking his hand as he came up beside him. I shrugged. "No, Alpha," he greeted Chase. "Doc," he nodded in response. "So, what's the verdict? How long was I out?" "Well, you were out for quite a while. 6 days to be exact. This one didn't leave your side for more than 20 minutes at a time," he said, gesturing to me, at which I gave Chase a cheeky smile, which he returned. "As for the verdict, I'm pretty sure that all the silver has worked its way out of your body, and you should be back on top in a few hours, up to a day from now." "Thank you, Doc," Chase spoke sincerely, his eyes sparkling. Doc left us alone, and he looked at me, his smile dropping a little. "You look exhausted." "Hails." "Gee, thanks." I chuckled dryly. I knew it to be true. My eyes were heavy from the exhaustion, and I had barely eaten or drank anything in the past week. Almost losing Chase had been one of the toughest things I'd ever gone through, right after losing my parents, or my mother, at least. He looked at me with sad eyes. "So what happened after I passed out?" "Luke showed up with Doc and they started working on you." "I don't know after that because I passed out." "Too," I answered, subconsciously rubbing my leg lightly where it was bandaged. I still couldn't walk on it thanks to that damn arrow, but I'd finally gotten used to crutches, although I definitely don't like it. Tears began to well up in my eyes. "God, Chase, I thought I'd lost you." He reached out and pulled me onto the bed with him. "Hey, come here." "Come here." "It's okay. We're all okay." "Hailey." We laid like that for a while, just sitting there and holding each other like nothing else mattered. Not speaking or doing anything, but just laying there together and appreciating each other's company. "What was it like when you were unconscious?" I asked him, keeping my head right where it was on his chest. He sighed. "It was amazing. In all honesty, I was with my parents and we were talking and laughing and they were there. We talked about you, you know?" "What did they say?" I asked. For some reason, I was incredibly nervous to hear what Chase's dead parents thought about me. He turned me to face him and smile. "That they love you, and think that you've brought out the best version of me. They love you, and I love you too." Smiling, I leaned up and placed a gentle but lingering kiss on his lips. "I love you too, Chase." There was a knock at the door and Chase told them to come in. At the sound of his voice, the door burst open, allowing Lily to spill inside, running to her brother, with Luke following closely behind. I slipped off of Chase for a second time and let him hug his sister tightly. Luke came up beside me and gave me a small smile. "Hey," raising an eyebrow. I glanced over to Lily. "So when are you going to tell him?" Luke just shook his head with a shrug, but I didn't miss the nervous look on his face. But I mean, I wouldn't want to tell Chase that either. Though, glad to see you're okay. "Man," Luke greeted his best friend. Chase laughed. "You and me both." He looked between the two of them and furrowed his brows. "Hang on. Did I miss something?" Yeah," Lily mumbled, looking down. "You are sort of the worst brother ever and missed my 18th birthday." Chase swore. "Shit, Lily, I am so sorry." She laughed. "Not your fault. But don't worry. I'll forgive you as long as you don't freak out. Don't freak out about what? He asked, glancing at me, smiling reassuringly. I took his hand in mine and nodded to Lily. Might as well tell him now while we're still at the hospital. She took Luke's hand in hers and smiled. We're sort of mates. Chase's brows drew together as he stared at their hands in an intense focus. What? Chapter 48. Sitting in the living room back at home. I couldn't help but look skeptically at my best friend and little sister cuddled up together on the couch across from me, arms wrapped around from behind, and I smiled as Hailey whispered in my ear, "Stop pouting, and just be happy for them." Turning my head to face her, I pressed my lips to hers. Who said anything about pouting? After I had threatened to separate his head from his body if he ever did anything to hurt her in any way, I'd settled down enough for Hailey to convince me that it was a good thing. The two of them together, they liked each other, cared for one another, and would protect each other with everything that they have, even if I didn't like it at first. I have to admit they're a good match. My sister would straighten Luke out. Let's give them some alone time, Hailey said, and I raised an eyebrow as I looked over to my sister who laid peacefully on Luke's lap. My own mate rolled her eyes and pulled me with her. Come on. I scooped her up so she didn't have to crutch up the stairs and carried her up the stairs. Dropping her on the bed, she let out a light laugh as I did so. Smiling down at her, I leaned forward, placing my lips on hers gently. Reaching up, she wrapped her arms around my neck and pulled me down to her, pressing our bodies closely together as the kiss deepened, biting down on our lip. I caused her to moan and I smiled into the kiss, my hands gripping her hips tightly as hers ran through my hair. Moving down, I left gentle kisses trailing down her jaw and neck until I reached the spot where I had marked her. I sucked on the spot, causing her to gasp and moan, her hands tightening on my shoulders, her nails digging into my skin through my t-shirt. I pulled away, looking down at her, her curly brown hair thrown all over the bed, her brown eyes sparkling as she looked up at me. God, you're beautiful. So are you, she whispered back, her hand cupping my cheek. I leaned into it, enjoying the feeling of the sparks that she sent coursing through me with a simple touch. Guys are not beautiful, I answered, although I didn't really care what she called me if we stayed in this position. Smiling, she shook her head. I don't care. You're beautiful, Chase Morgan. And you're all mine. Leaning so that my nose was buried in the crook of her neck, I mumbled, "Thank God for that." Then I began kissing her neck again, working my way up to where her eager lips were waiting for my own. Her hands tangled in my hair and mine wandered her body endlessly, and we were gone. I was a goner. I looked down at Hailey, her small frame tucked into me as the moonlight from the window shone on her bare back. I rubbed circles with my thumb on her back, watching as her body rose and fell with every breath. She looked stunningly peaceful as she slept, and it was surprising considering everything she's been through. It's a wonder she's still here. Honestly, that we're both here, for that matter. We've both lost both of our parents, have almost been killed, and have lost people we care about. We've hurt each other and hurt ourselves trying to protect each other. We were made for each other, and that's why we're mates. We are both broken and bruised and battered, but we are both still breathing and we're together. To me, that's all that really matters. I have my sister, my mate and my pack, and that's all that I can really ask for. I didn't even realize I had stopped rubbing Hailey's back until she pouted. No, don't stop. It felt good. Smiling, I resumed the motion. I thought you were asleep. Sorry. Peeling her eyes open, she looked up at me through her eyelashes. Nothing to apologize for. Silly. Besides, I was like half asleep. She looked away and closed her eyes again, burying herself in my armpit, and I had no complaints as she nestled her naked body closer to my own. The feeling between Hailey and I had been euphoric, to say the very least. It was breathtaking and wondrous and heavenly and everything I could have imagined and more. We were fully mated now, and we were connected as two bodies with one heart, and could feel everything that the other thought. The best part was that I knew I could talk to her through her mind now. She wouldn't be able to directly speak back, but I'd be able to talk to her and read her emotions mentally. Although she didn't seem too keen for me to be inside her head, I told her she could practice keeping me out, much to my dismay. "I love you," she said, kissing my shoulder lightly. I smiled down at her. "I love you too, Hailey." Chapter 49. It's been 4 months, and now here we are, dressed and ready in the black and purple graduation robes, waiting to close the book of this chapter of our lives, this very messy, crazy, and long chapter. Chase came up behind me as I stood in front of the full-length mirror in our room, straightening out any wrinkles in my robe with my hands. "Stop fidgeting," he murmured, placing a kiss at the base of my neck. "You look perfect." I smiled, tilting my head a bit to give him better access, and he trailed his kisses up to my jaw before spinning me around and placing a hungry kiss on my lips. Laughing, I tried pulling away, but he tightened his arms around my waist, lifting me up and placing me on the bed. "We're gonna be late." "I don't give a shit," he rumbled, moving his lips back down along my neck and down to the spot where he had marked me. He sucked on it gently, and a moan escaped my lips as I threw my head back. He took that as an invitation to pull off my graduation gown and the dress underneath along with it, staring down at me in my bra and underwear with hunger evident in his eyes. Huffing, I leaned up and wrapped my arms around his neck and pulled him down to me. "Fine, but you better make it quick." He smiled before crashing his lips to mine. Lily frowned as we all stood outside of the high school, pouting. "I can't believe you guys are all graduating without me. Then you'll have all of the attention next year when you graduate." Luke smiled, kissing her forehead. Her pout melted for a second before she restored it. Rolling my eyes at her childishness, I couldn't help but laugh. Chase leaned into my ear. "Remind me again why I'm allowing that." Turning, I raised a brow. "Because you love both of them and want them to be happy together, just like we are." At this, it was his turn to raise a brow to me. I shook my head. "Let me put it this way. What would you do if Lily told you that you could never kiss me again, or hug me, or see me, or even be near me?" His eyes darkened and I chuckled, pressing my hand to his cheek. "Then there's you answer. So, are we gonna go graduate or what?" Josh spoke up, Rebecca in tow as she flipped through her note cards ridiculously fast. She's valedictorian and is losing her mind over how bad she could end up messing up her speech. He turned to her and rolled his eyes, snatching the cards from her. "Jesus Christ. Becca, you'll be fine. You are the smartest person I know, and you already have that thing committed to heart. I'm pretty sure you'll still remember every word in like 40 years or something too. Just relax. Okay?" She smiled and nodded, thanking her mate for the support. Looking at the time, we decided it was time to go line up, and after a rather drawn-out kiss, Lily left Luke and the rest of us to go claim her stake at the very front row of the bleachers to cheer us on as we walked to get our diplomas. It's still crazy to believe that after everything, we're all standing here, ready to start off in what they call the real world. Although for me, I think I've been in the real world for a few years now. Slowly, we all began to file onto the football field and into our respective seats, facing the bleachers filled with loved ones and family members, and mostly packed members if I'm being honest here. Rebecca stood at the front, smiling proudly as she faced the students, her friends and packmates that she has known since birth, ready to address them as valedictorian. "Hi," she greeted, then looked down with a smile before looking back up. "Most of you know me, but I'll introduce myself anyways. I'm Rebecca Clydesdale, and I've gone to school with almost all of you since school even began for us. So I know we might all be annoyed with each other by now." This earned a couple laughs throughout the crowd. But we're all family here. Every single one of us has made an impact on at least one other person here. Whether it was big or small, we've all connected with each other on a level that can only be described as family. It isn't simple, and it can sometimes get messy, really messy. But the point is, we've always been there for each other. We have always had each other's backs. And for better or for worse, we've stood side by side through so many trials in high school. Whether it was a chemistry test, a breakup, or something more serious, we're all standing here today, having made it past all that. She spoke confidently, with sincerity in her eyes. So here's to a step forward, a step in the right direction towards our future. When we are standing up here today, walking across this stage and receiving our diplomas, we are entering a new age, and it's a day to remember for the rest of our lives. So let's remember it together, as a family, because we might hate each other sometimes, and we might make each other want to pull our hair out, but we survived high school together, and we can survive so much more. She smiled, and I found myself doing the same, a few tears pricking my eyes. So here's to the future, one that we can spend together. With that, she stepped back from the microphone, and everyone applauded her, earning a few extra loud cheers from Lily, Chase, Luke, Josh, and I out of support for our friend. One by one, we all walked, receiving our diplomas. I received an embarrassingly loud whoop from Chase when my name was called, and most of the pack members in the crowd laughed at the action. So, naturally, I returned the favor when he walked and got his own diploma. We were all gathered around in a circle after the ceremony, Chase's arm around my shoulders. He kissed the top of my head, smiling. "We did it. Guys." "That's so cheesy." "Man," Luke spoke, rolling his eyes. I smiled. "Well, here's to the future." Rebecca shot me a sardonic look for that one. Chapter 50. I looked down at Hailey, who was sleeping, snuggled up into me. It was dark in the room, but I could still see her face perfectly from the moonlight pouring in through the window. Her eyelashes fluttered as she slept, an exhale of breath coming out from her pouted lips. God, she's absolutely perfect, and she's all mine. These past few months with her have been the best of my life, and there was absolutely no denying it. Mom and Dad were right. She is the best thing to ever happen to me and has changed me for the best. Her eyes peeled open as she woke up and looked up at me, a tired and goofy smile on her face. "Hey." "Hi," I responded, smiling at her. "What are you doing up?" She shrugged the best she could, considering she was tucked into my side and under my arm. "I could ask you the same question, Mister." Chuckling, I kissed the top of her head. "I was just thinking about you and about us. I was thinking about how amazing you are and how much my life has changed for the better ever since I met you." "You're going to make me cry." She smiled up at me real big, before resting her head down to kiss my bare chest. We didn't really bother much with clothes anymore. "I'd hate to be the one to make you cry." I murmured into her hair, leaning into her more if that was even possible. She rolled over to be on top of me, resting her chin on the back of her hand that rested on my chest. "You could never make me cry, at least. Not out of sadness. You are perfect. Chase Morgan, you are the best thing that I've had in a very long time. And I know you think that I somehow helped you. But the truth is, You saved me. I was nothing but anger and hatred and a murderer. Really. And you saved me from that, showed me the light, if you will. So I guess I'm thanking you right now for saving me when you did. I don't know what would have happened if you didn't. And I love you. I need you to know that as much as you know that the sky is blue and water is wet. I love you with every fiber in my being, chastened that this love is the most natural thing I ever felt before. I smiled up at her in adoration at what she just said. Hailey, I love you so goddamn much it's unreal. You are my own little miracle. And I couldn't be happier than I am right now. Hailey laughed. A melodic, light sound flitting into my ears. I can't wait to spend the rest of my life with you. Her words hit me and my breathing faltered for a fraction of a second as what she said sunk in. And in that moment, I could picture it, a future with Hailey and I. 10 years from now with little kids running around. Hailey being the amazing Luna she can be and that I know she already is. I could see her getting mad at me every time I'd let the kids go roaming in the woods alone or start to train our kids too early and push them too far. I could see us growing old together, all gray and wrinkled and sitting on a front porch with grandchildren. So do it, I said. Spend the rest of your life with me. Marry me, Hailey Argent. Do me the honor of spending the rest of our lives together. She grinned, a small tear escaping from her eye. Absolutely. 100% yes. I'll marry you. Thank God. I breathed, pulling her up to me and kissing her with everything I had in me, hopeful for the bright future I have in front of me with the bright girl on top of me. All was well, and we couldn't be happier.